Hello, everybody. Today I want to talk about an important part of a research project. What is a research problem and what is a research gap? And what's the difference between these two?
Welcome. First of all, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss future videos. If you are a researcher, academic, or simply someone passionate about contributing to scholarly work, you are in the right place.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about an important question, and that is about research problem. What is a research problem statement? And also I want to compare it with a research gap. What is a research gap? So I need to start with a simple answer. So a research gap is an area of knowledge which hasn't been fully explored or hasn't been explored yet. So that's a research gap. But the problem statement can be clarified or identified if you analyze whatever happening in the industry, community, or society. So it's more about identification of a challenge, an issue outside the university. So what's the difference again? The difference is the research gap comes from the literature. You need to analyze the literature, you need to review the literature, and then you need to identify the gap. So you identify what hasn't been fully explored based on many research papers published recently. So the gap is identified based on the academic work, university work, or whatever published by scholars and researchers at the university. On the other hand, the research problem is going to refer to a real challenge outside the university. So it's not necessarily, or it's not going to be supported by research papers. It's going to be supported by evidence or a specific fact published or described in industry reports, government reports, newspapers, or any credible sources that is available to you, and it's talking about what is happening in the society, community, uh, um, or an industry. So the main difference is gap is supported by publications, scholarly publications or research papers, but problem is supported by a fact or evidence outside the university. So it's easy to get these two things confused in writing. So when you are writing, perhaps you use some keywords that is going to be good for explaining what is a research gap, but it's not really appropriate to um, explain a research problem. So that is a real challenge sometimes when you are going to really write something. But the definition looks a bit simple, but in practice, when you want to produce like a paper or whatever, it can be really confusing, and you need to consider that. So in this video, I'm going to talk about two main topics. First of all, what is a problem? And I will give you some examples. What is a good way of explaining a research problem or a problem statement? And these examples can help you to understand what kind of keywords you can use for your problem statement. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to talk about a research gap. I will show you again an example of a research gap, and you can see, oh, that is a research gap, or maybe I need to use this kind of words to explain the gap and in a clear way, in a convincing way. And then I'm going to compare these two in terms of words that is going to be used for any words that is going to be used for explaining each one of them, to make sure you can really distinct them and you can really clarify how different they are. You can also read my books. There are many examples and words that can be used to describe each one of them. My book is named as Research Proposals with the Awareness of AI. You can find it on Google Play and Amazon. So that book is going to be like a guide to you how to develop different parts of a proposal, which is typically can be used in your first chapter of any report or research report or any thesis or dissertations. So problem statement and research gap, both of them are really important to be clarified and distinct. Okay, let's talk about the problem statement. When you want to write your problem statement, you start with a broader problem. You're talking about the problem related to your big topics. For example, you say carbon emission. You talk about large cities, or you talk about delay in construction, energy consumptions in different types of buildings. But all of them are broad. It's a problem, yes. But that problem addresses something which is very, very big. And this means you're going to address it. But it's not possible to you as an individual to do that in a short period of time. It needs a lot of time to address a big problem, like a grand challenge. And also it needs a lot of researchers to work together, and they need appropriate funding, a couple of years to address some part of the problem, address the problem partially. How you're going to do that within a short time frame by yourself. And that's why most supervisors, assessors, or examiners, they ask you to narrow it down. And whatever you do, still they say narrow it down. It's a big problem. It's a general problem. But I'll tell you how you can check your problem statement. So if you want to say my research problem is really specific, you need to check if you really can address it within your thesis. If you're talking about carbon emission in the whole world, are you going to address that, solve it forever in your thesis? Of course not. So what exactly you are able to address in your last chapter of your report, thesis, dissertation, what is exactly that? So talk about it. So you start with a broader problem, narrow it down, make it more specific, and that specific one is the one you are going to address. Of course, you can talk about a big problem, a big challenge, insert a couple of references, but that should be very short because everybody knows the big challenge anyway. But you need to be very concise, very specific, talk about a part of that problem that you're going to address, because all these problems have been partially addressed by numerous people, like many other people's institutions. They said we address this part of the problem or that part. That's why you need to find the gap. What is the gap? Still the gap is big, but you want to do a part of that. Very tiny, very small. That is fine, but it should be very clear what exactly you want to do. And it's like a promise. When you say this is problem statement, my problem statement, you should be able to address it partially or fully. And that's why you need to be careful when you decide to clarify your problem. But one more thing here. When you have the problem statement at the end of your report or thesis, you need to carefully use the words, you filled the gap, this is a problem, it's still a gap, and I filled it, or I partially addressed that. So addressing that means still I addressed that, it's not really fully completed, and in the future some people need to continue this, right? But fully completed means you fill the gap. Nobody else is going to do that. So you need to use appropriate words to clarify whatever you have done. You fully addressed the gap or partially addressed. So it should be a problem, and the problem shouldn't be addressed by others or fully addressed by others. Still, there is something for you. You are going to address it in this thesis or in this research project. So we need to really be specific in terms of using the appropriate words to say what is the specific gap I'm going to address. So when you are going to write your problem statement, you need to allocate very small part of that to a big problem, like global things. But the most part of that should be specified to whatever you want to address. It should be supported by evidence or publications outside the university or Google Scholar. You need to find out many credible sources. It can be government reports, industry reports, whatever, and you need to refer to them, and they should be fresh. So the evidence should be fresh. You can't cite something that has been published 5 years ago. So you use a reference from 5 years ago, and then you say, I'm going to address this problem. But you know, every year, every month, people are publishing papers trying to address problems, and who knows if somebody else has addressed that exactly research question you are going to address 1 year ago. So the evidence or fact should be supported by fresh evidence, new papers, new things. But when I say new papers, it's not scholarly papers. It can be gray literature and evidence. You need to show the problem. It's not the gap. Gap can be addressed by research papers. You analyze them and you say this is a gap. So that's the difference between a problem or a gap in terms of referencing. So that is an important part of the proposal, and you need to make sure that you are going to distinguish two. And when you clarify this is a problem, and well, second, you need to say still a gap, and third, you need to say how significant is it, how valuable is it. So there is a problem, nobody else has done that, but this is worth to be addressed. And people outside, they got affected by this problem. Financially, in terms of health, in terms of many different things, they are affected by this problem. And it's important. So then you need to clarify the significance of the work. And also, well, later when you get some funding, you need to show the value of your fundings as well. But the significance of the work can be more explanation. You can explain, justify, but it's much better, it's ideal if you quantify it. You give some numbers and say, because of this problem, the effect is this much per year, per month, globally, internationally, whatever. And it shows the value of your future work, whatever you want to do in this research project. So that is the significance of the work. And some people, they get confused. What is a problem, a statement, and what is the significance, or what is the significance of the work? And that means they get confused when they are explaining the problem. Always they say this is an important problem, but well, still it's early to talk about the significance. First, clarify what is the problem, and then talk about the significance of the work.
For more tips on research writing and publishing, feel free to connect with me on social media, subscribe to my YouTube channel, or check out my recent books. Stay in touch and